Hello, my name is Melissa Treinkman. I'm thrilled to be here today to chat with María Martínez. You can read more about her in Volume 81, Issue 2 of the Vocal Point column in the Journal of Singing. That's the November-December 2024 issue. What inspired you to pursue a career in opera, and how did your upbringing influence your musical journey?
That's a great question because if you think about it, how many people, especially in their young formative years, decide, I want to be an opera singer, unless they've been exposed to it in some way. But for me, I was born into a musical family, more so on my mother's side. My dad had great rhythm, but he couldn't match pitch to save his life. But very beautiful charisma whenever he entered a room, and till his last days he would say that I got my charisma from him, and I would nod of course and say yes I did that. So my mom in her day was an opera singer, and she's the youngest of eight, and they were all musical. And when I was a young child in Puerto Rico and family gatherings would take place, one uncle would show up with his guitar and his gorgeous singing voice, singing ballads, and his sister, my aunt, would sit at the piano and start accompanying him there. They would all improvise and sing harmony, and I just thought everybody did this. And then the cousins, we would all gather and join in or observe and watch, and then it was our turn to go up and do something. And I thought everyone's family did this. And one of my aunts, who was my aunt because she married into the family, would say marrying into the Colon family is similar to entering a 1950s musical where people burst into song for no reason but expect applause for some reason. Shortly after I was born, months after, my parents went to Florida State University to pursue their doctorates, my mother in music and my father in psychology. So the first 4 years of my life were spent in Tallahassee around a lot of music making, including with their resident composer at the time, Carlisle Floyd. I mean, these were the people that my mom was around, and I was there thanks to my parents being there. Fast forward to, I would say, young childhood and being absolutely enamored with musical theater and variety shows on TV. And I would just marvel, but I was shy. So while I started to display a very good ear and the ability to pick up anything by ear on the piano, I wasn't quite sure how music would play out in my life. I knew that it would at least be a hobby and a strong core for me in my life, but I wasn't sure that it would be as a performer. And when I was in high school, my sophomore year, I was given the role of Laurie in the musical Oklahoma. And I thought, maybe this means that I might actually be kind of good at this. Let's see. And then I remember the moment when I realized, I think I can do this better than I could do anything else. And I would love to have that be my mission. And the reason I emphasize that is that it's important for all of us, every single human being, to have a sense of purpose. Because when you have a sense of purpose, there's this validation, this existential validation. Now, your sense of purpose could be volunteering. Your sense of purpose can be teaching. Your sense of purpose can be healing.
Hmm.
It could be so many things, but it's important to tune into that. And so when I found that, I said, okay, let's go for this. So I auditioned for the Boston Conservatory of Music. And into my first semester there, my voice teacher there said, well, dear, I don't think your voice is ideally suited for where musical theater is headed at this time. Because what I wanted was more of the classics, West Side Story, Guys and Dolls, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Oklahoma, things like that, Carousel. And it was going more in the rock direction. And while I always idolized Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks and her vocalism, my voice just couldn't do that sort of thing. So she said, I think you'd be better suited for classical music. I wept for a week.
Really?
I said no. But then this is where I said no as a very naive 18-year-old. My mom would drag me to the Metropolitan Opera when I was 6 years old, when she couldn't get a babysitter, and I had to sit through all that stuff. Okay, all that stuff means Franco Corelli, okay, Birgit Nilsson, Teresa Silisgara, Eleanor Ross. I mean, voices like that is what I was rolling my eyes about. So I was getting such an education at the time. So now I'm jumping backwards in time to when I was 6, 7, 8, and seeing these incredible opera singers on stage. And I would lean over to my mom, and I had my teddy bear in hand, but so I could stay focused in the moment. And I'd say, Mom, the music is beautiful and their voices are amazing, but why do they just stand there? I want more. I need more. So the theater aspect, I think, is what drew me more to stage than anything else. So straight drama and musical theater is what I wanted to do. So again, going now back to when I was 18, 19 at this point, my teacher said, I think you need to go into classical music. Okay, I'm going to finish this school year and then I'm going to go back to New York and I'm going to audition for Manhattan School in Juilliard and see if I might get lucky to get in. And that ended up yielding good results. And I was accepted into both Manhattan School and Juilliard, and I chose Juilliard. And I thought, okay, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, I'd say
And
so.
then I did my undergrad and my grad studies there.
I know you as an amazing singer. I have the opportunity to sing in the LA Opera Chorus, and I've been in, I think, 3 or 4 shows with you there, and getting to kind of stand very close to you and analyze what you're doing. It seems when I watch you sing that you have a very specific technique, and you're extremely consistent, and your voice is very youthful. And I mean that in that it sounds very healthy. So what do you think, what's your secret?
I'd say I started with the notion, and this was shared with me by my mother, and she learned this from her teachers as well. Sing on the lighter side of what your voice can do for as long as possible.
Mm.
Another way of saying that is sing as young as you can, as long as you can. And I tell my students, now I'm a very proud faculty member of Rice University Shepherd School of Music.
Right.
And I share this with my students because some of them, they're already showing glimpses in parts of their voice of much bigger repertoire down the road for them.
Mm.
And then I say, but please don't go there just yet. If you start singing that and offering that in auditions right now,
Mm.
people are going to think, they can do this now. And they'll put you on to sing repertoire that your body doesn't quite yet know how to support what your voice wants to do. You, therefore, if you get too far too soon, and I mean in repertoire, by far, I mean going into things that are just a little too heavy, your longevity will suffer. So in my case, so I'm a full lyric with a shading of lirico spinto. So a spinto is more of what I would call the big girl rep. And
Yep.
that would be things like Rusalka, Madame Butterfly, things like that are just a bit bigger. And by bigger, I mean that the orchestration is heavier and there's a lot of brass, even Tosca, which I'm doing again in a few months.
Oh,
So
no.
that has a lot of brass, a lot of sections that are forte, and where the orchestra is all there and with such beautiful texture. But it can be tough to navigate without pushing and driving your instrument. The moment you start to push and drive, that's when the other example I give when you do that, it's imagine a very healthy and thick rubber band that you stretch, you let it go, and it goes back to its normal shape. You do it again a few times, it goes back to its normal shape. After a while, you stretch it again and it'll relax, but it won't go right quite back to where it was. That means you're starting to get into vocal issues. And as much power as a singer can get out there, it's still very, our voice box is delicate.
Mm.
But listening to your body, never putting more than you can. There has to be that healthy balance, but really learning how to listen to your body and your voice. Not, let me specify, not listening to it by, oh, that sounds good.
Right.
Half the time I'm telling my students, please trust what you feel, not what you hear. Because sometimes I hear from them, I did this competition, but I walked out into the hall and I couldn't quite hear anything. So I started to drive and I say, no, that's why I'm telling you, trust what you feel, not what you're hearing coming back to you. Because if you don't hear anything, that's the first few seconds are a lost opportunity in which you're trying to gauge what you're hearing. You have to trust what you're feeling. So it's a very different mindset.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like you have a lot of discipline when it comes to that. I remember you, I think was it that you sang Butterfly at LA Opera and then the next season sang Carmen? I was just just awestruck at your ability to navigate both of those and never push, even in a mezzo role. Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, the really cool thing about the role of Carmen is that all of her arias, the dynamics for the orchestra are piano.
Ah,
Yeah.
hmm.
So she never has the need to push. And also as a character, if we look at her, she would never push anyway. She doesn't care what anybody thinks. She does what she wants and makes her own rules within her society, within the society that she belongs. She will do what she wants. The only scene that's tricky, I think, for anybody, whether soprano or mezzo, is the last scene with Don Jose, because
Yes.
that's where it can get quite raw, quite visceral. And you just have to be careful that your body's always anchored. Again, so that your body can support what your voice wants to do. You need to use your whole body.
And you definitely seem like you have the heart of an educator, a teacher. You're so inspirational. I know that mentorship has been a big part of your career throughout. Can you tell me
Thank
a little
you.
bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, I would say I would start by saying no one is born knowing.
Mm,
That's different than intuition and wisdom, but truly there are so many things, so many aspects of this career, and let's say aspects in life or of life, that you need to learn the nuts and bolts. You need to know that it's okay to make mistakes. You need to know that there's no silly question,
mm,
and it might seem common sense, but in a very competitive, exposed field, it can be daunting. So, some of the things I share with my students are when it didn't go well for me,
mm.
when I did not place in a competition, and thankfully, one of the judges did give me feedback. Lovely, lovely man who said, it was wonderful to hear you. The first aria, impeccable. But then when we asked you for the second aria, it was lovely, but the nuances were not at the level of the first aria that you sang. And because everyone who sang was at such top notch level, it was enough to not give you a prize. And I thanked him. I said, thank you so, so much. This is incredible, valuable information. And that's what I tell my students. And oftentimes when I tell them, they'll respond just with like really large eyes, like, oh, I never even thought about that. I said, yep. And the reason that matters is because it can show a level of how seriously you take the preparation process.
One of the things I admire about you, both right now and when I'm watching you on stage, is you do seem to have this calm, grounded presence, and it puts everyone at ease. Is that something that is just your natural demeanor? Did you ever battle with performance anxiety?
I've always had a level of anxiety since I was a child. When I was a child, it was way worse, but I think that had more to do with, okay, so after Tallahassee, when my parents finished their doctorates, we moved back to Puerto Rico for 2 years before moving to New York. So
Oh,
from the ages of 4 to 6, I was in Puerto Rico, and I'm an only child and the only one of my cousins that's an only. And so I was around all of my cousins. In our culture, there's no such thing as your extended family per se, and then your nuclear family. You are all family. So when I'm 6 years old, we moved, my parents and I, to New York, and they hit the ground running, pursuing their careers. And I felt like a complete fish out of water. I had to relearn English because I had forgotten it in those 2 years when we went back to Puerto Rico. And it came quickly, but it was very, very shocking. No more cousins. My grandmother was not there. Just a lot of new in Manhattan. So that was a really big learning curve for me. And I think that that's where my anxiety escalated. However, and I didn't do this on purpose, and I think this is how I'm pre wired, I internalized that anxiety. So it wasn't something you could see outwardly necessarily, but it was inside.
interesting.
And I thought, I don't want people to see how frightened I do feel or how out of place or awkward I feel, but I just get very quiet. I get very quiet and I observe. I observe a lot, and I'm going to see how much I can learn by observing, and then I'll do. So when I got into Juilliard, I would say, I mean, not nervous to the point of not being able to do what I would do, but it was a great price for me
Mm,
emotionally. It was just stressful. I was given the gift of, it was called the Gluck Fellowship.
Hmm.
And how it worked for the students that receive that award, there's a certain amount that you receive, and that will all go towards your tuition. And what you have to do to earn that is go to an organization, a place, and perform for free for that organization. And at the time, and let me just remind you, at this time, it was early 90s, shelters for people with AIDS. There was no treatment yet for HIV.
Wow, right. Mhm.
Homeless shelters, soup kitchens, hospice care. I remember Memorial Sloan Kettering
Mm.
Cancer Center. So I would go with a pianist, and this pianist and I were assigned to give these performances. And for each performance, the fellowship would pay me 200. I was given 2,000
Mm,
at
mhm.
that time, and I would get 200, and that would always go to towards my tuition. And for the first one, I remember thinking, first of all, on a personal level, how cool, how awesome to be given this. I was scheduled to sing at a soup kitchen at a church basement, and the pianist and I are waiting to start our performance. And they're looking our way a little confused as to who are these people, what are they doing here? So we, one at a time, we start. And many were confused as to what's going on. Some started to giggle a little bit. They felt maybe uncomfortable. But it took maybe no more than 10 minutes where their focus was fully on the music. And
Mm.
you could see the change on their countenance. They
Mm.
didn't have a worried, stressed out look on their face. They were in the moment. And I think they figured out that that was for them.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I was so moved. I remember going home and crying because I thought, now I realized the importance of what we can do as musicians, as artists, as performers. We're there to heal. We're there to take care of someone who needs that, who desperately wants that.
Mm.
And so then the nerves started to subside after that, because I realized we're all in need, and most of us are going through something difficult or painful. And we all need that soothing that comes from a live performance. And then I said, okay, it's not about me. It's about something far, far greater. And in addition to that, I love the music. So I will serve the music, I will serve the composers, I will serve the art form, I will serve the audience. So
Mm.
when it turned into a service oriented calling with the gifts that I was given, that then I've been able to work on, that's where I found my purpose.
Mm.
And again, going back to purpose, I encourage everyone to find whatever their purpose is and really, really live it.
Wow. One thing I notice, do you chew gum during rehearsals?
I absolutely do.
I
So
wanted to ask you about that. And then you hide it after when you're ready to
I
sing.
keep it lodged right in here. So I have a dear colleague, one of the most loved singers in the opera world, Brandon Jovanovic,
Mm, mhm.
incredible tenor. So I'm going to take us all back to the year 2009. Join me on the time machine. So he and I are doing a new production of Rusalka in Glyndebourne. So there's a long interval where Rusalka does not sing. And then there's all of Act Two up until the point where she can't take it anymore. And then she sees her father again, and she finds her voice and is able to vent, but it's quite a demanding aria. So I asked our stage director, may I please run off stage? I have a few seconds and just get a sip of water before I have to sing.
Yeah.
And then Brandon said, hey, Anna Maria, I'm going to clue you in on a secret. Something I do. I always keep a Ricola in here, because at that point he was beginning to do the very long roles, such as Wagner, things like that, where you have to be on stage for such a long time without singing, and then burst into, perfect delivery, perfect technical delivery. And he said, it's fantastic because you have something here. You're constantly creating saliva. You're not going to feel dry. And any given day, the pressure in the air is going to be different. The humidity in the air is going to be different. You're going to feel different depending on how hydrated you are or not. What did you eat before or not? Did you sleep enough or not? All of those things are stressors. So I said, okay. So then I started with Ricola, and I would keep it lodged in, and it went very well. But then I thought, I think I want to try minty gum, sugar free. Not everybody likes the feeling and they have to get used to it. But if it works for you, I recommend it.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time today and chatting with me. It was just fascinating, and I loved everything that you shared with me and our audience.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for having me. And I wish you all the best and all of your listeners all the best as well. And I look forward to when we see each other again.
Me too. Thank you so much.